One of the ironies of life, and one of the ironies of suffering and pain, is that it's God's greatest way of getting our attention. And there's something about pain and suffering that makes us look up. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or not Christian, if you're a believer or not a believer, or even if you're an atheist. People tend, when they're in suffering and great pain, they tend to look up. C.S. Lewis wrote, "God whispers to us in our pleasure, speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is the megaphone that roused a deaf world." All of us have been or been through some pain. And God shouts at us. And he yells, almost like he yells at us, gets our attention because it tends to make us look up. And suddenly what happens is that we enter into a time of pain and sufferings. You know, we get that phone call. We get that diagnosis. We get that summons. We get that call in the middle of the night that breaks our heart. And all of a sudden what we do is we look up. And along with looking up, what we do is we ask this question. We ask why. The people of Florida, I'm sure, are asking why. The people of Fort Myers are asking why us and not them. Why did that happen to us? Why have we lost all of our possessions? Why have we lost a loved one? Why have we lost a friend? And why we want to know is why, because in you and I, we want to make sense of things. We want to be able to connect the dots. We want to say, why did this happen here? Is it something that I did over there? Is it something that happened in my life? When we look up, and then what happens is we look down, right? And we ask, why? Why so young? Why did that happen today? Why wasn't it fixed? Why am I in such pain? And the different why questions, we ask it in different ways, but it always comes down to the same thing, is that we want to find the reason so that we can endure the reason. We want to find the reason for the pain so we can endure the pain. We think that we can find it. We try to find the reason by looking around our lives to sort of piece it together. Like, well, if I only would have done this 2 years ago, it'd be different today. If I only did that, or if she hadn't said this, if this didn't happen over here, then maybe this wouldn't happen over here. And so we work at trying to connect these dots of why pain is entered into our lives. And we think to ourselves, well, everything happens for a reason, right? We make that statement. And I love the little meme that says sometimes the reason is because we're stupid. But that's a whole different sermon. We'll do that later. But you know, so everything does, you know, we want to find the reason so that we can endure it. We can endure the pain that is brought on. And if we can't find the reason, if we can't make sense of it, what happens to our faith? Does it go out the window? Do we stop praying? Do we stop engaging the Bible? Most of us at one level or another, though, at times have chosen pain, right? You've chosen something that was painful in order to get where you want to be. In 1994, I was sitting across eating lunch with a friend named Jerry. Jerry was about old enough to be my dad. And Jerry said this. He says, I always wanted to run the Boston Marathon before I turned 50. And I was about 34 at that time, 33, 34. And I had been a runner in high school. And I thought, you know what? I would love to run the Boston Marathon. Now, I was running about 6 miles a week in October of 94. And I said, okay, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. So I endured pain, because to train for a marathon in order to finish at least horizontal or vertical, you have to train, and you have to train hard, and you have to run these, have these 20-mile runs in and these 22-mile runs in at one time, not over the week. And I began to build up. And by the next year, April of 1995, I ran my one and only marathon. And why did I do that? Because, see what happens is I chose pain, right, in order to get the reward of something good. So some of you have decided to have knee replacement surgery, right? You had knee replacement surgery because you thought to yourself, I will go through the pain of knee replacement surgery in order to end the pain in the future, but you knew that the recovery was going to be terrible, right? You knew it was going to be hard, and yet at the same time you said, I'm going to choose pain in order to receive something good. You had a why, right? You had a reason to do it. And so people have been choosing pain all along the line, and people have always wanted to know why. And we're going to go into Daniel chapter 8 today, and it's going to be, I'm going to tell you this is not going to be an emotionally satisfying sermon. You're not going to come out and say, wow, that makes me feel good. All right? It's not. I'm just letting you up front. But I hope it's helpful. Because each of us suffer. Each of us experience pain of life. Life's hard. And we live in basically the easy times. In comparison, the majority of history. When's the last time you pumped water from a well and walked 5 miles carrying that water? When's the last time you lived on $1 a day? Most people up to 1895 lived on $1 a day. Very few people lived as good as we have it. But we still suffer. We still feel pain. We still experience loss. So let's walk this through. What we will find in chapter 8 of Daniel is that God is sovereign. That God is sovereign. And it'll give us two ways that he is sovereign. Sovereign means that he rules, that he's in control, that he leads. So let's look at verse 1. It says, in the 3rd year, the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after which I appeared to me at the first. And I saw that in the vision, and when I saw in Susa of the citadel, which is the province of Elam, and I saw a vision, and I was at Ulai Canal. Now, this is the 3rd year of Belshazzar. It's about 551 BC. Belshazzar is king over Babylon. His father, Nebuchadnezzar, is the king over all of Babylon, all the whole country of Babylon. And Daniel has this vision, and he's in Susa at the citadel, which basically means he's in Iran at this time. He's down there in Iran. Now, what does God's sovereignty will show us as we get into this next section here is that God is all-knowing. That's the first part of God's sovereignty, that he knows all. Nothing comes to God by surprise. Nothing, he sees it coming, okay? He sees the future as easy as he sees the past. He is not limited by time, space like you and I are. But let's look at it. Verse 3. I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. This is the vision. And it had 2 horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. And I saw the ram charging westward, northward, and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased, and he became great. And as I was considering, and behold, a male goat came from the west, across the face of the whole earth, touching the ground, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. It came to the ram with its 2 horns, and which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his powerful wrath. Verse 7, I saw him close to the ram, and he was enraged against him, and struck the ram, and broke his 2 horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, trampled on him. And there was no one who could rescue the ram from its power. Then the goat became exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it, there came up four conspicuous horns toward the four winds of heaven. So we got a ram and a goat. It's basically a farm. Okay? That's what's going on. Is that what he's talking about? No, that's not what he's talking about. So what's happening in this vision? Well, this vision, if you jump down to verses 19 to 22, it tells us what's going on in the vision. And it will be very clear. We don't have to wonder what kingdoms is he talking about, what rulers are he talking about. We can figure this out pretty easy. So look at verse 19. It says, he said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be of the latter end of indignation. For it refers to an appointed time of the end. As for the ram, what you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of the Media and Persia. This is the Cyrus, okay? This is the Medes and the Persians. They're in charge. They're the leaders here, okay? Then the goat is the king of the Greece. And the great horn between its eyes is the first king. Now, who is that? He's a goat, greatest of all time, right? That's what that stands for. At least that's what we say, right? Greatest of all time. He's the goat. Well, that is Alexander the Great, okay? He's the first of the Greek Hellenistic kings, okay? As for the horn that was broken in the place, which is the four others arose, four kingdoms shall arise from this nation, but not with his power. So Cyrus takes over Babylon, the Medes and the Persians. Okay, that's who he is. He takes it over. The horn of the goat, Alexander the Great, defeated the Medes and the Persians, and this happens around 331 BC. So there's 220 years between when Daniel receives this prophecy, this vision, and when it's fulfilled. 220 years. Can you imagine? Could you imagine that like just think of this. Thomas Jefferson was president in 1802. 220 years ago. Could you imagine him predicting that we, the United States, would be vying for superpower status with China? Could have he thought about that? He barely knew that China existed, let alone thinking of us as this little country on the Atlantic, between the Atlantic and the Pacific, would have even known that we would be a superpower one day. He would have never been able to connect those dots, right? But yet, Daniel's able to. Why? Because, not Daniel, because God gave it to him, right? God knows all. There's nothing that God doesn't know about you and me. He knows what the people of Florida are going through. He knows what you're going through. He knows the losses that you've experienced. He knows the joys that you have. He knows all. He knows what's going on. He knows everything. He knows when a sparrow falls. He knows the number of hairs on your head. And that's even whenever he has to count your Susan and he has to count Mike's. Mike's might be a little bit easier, but hey, who knows? Who knows, right? I mean, really. I mean, God knows everything. There's nothing that God doesn't know. He's all-knowing, and he knows what's behind your pain. He knows what's behind your suffering. He knows what's behind your what. He knows the why behind your what. The second thing that we find about God's sovereignty, God in control, is that he's all-powerful. That he is strong and mighty to save. Let's look at verse 23. And at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king of bold face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. His power shall be great, but not by his own power, and he shall cause fearful destruction, and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper under his hand. And in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes. See what he says about him? This is not a good guy. Go back there. Look at what it says. This king is bold, right? He understands riddles. He's smart, right? His power will be great, but it won't be his own power. He's getting it from somewhere else. He shall cause fearful destruction. Why is God allowing this to happen? Why is he allowing this guy to rise up like this? He will destroy mighty men, and he'll destroy the people who are saints. By his cunning, he shall make deceit prosper. He shall make falsehood prosper. He made lies become successful. And he's going to be successful. This guy is going to be that. However, this powerful king, what does it say? And he shall be broken, but by no human hand. Someone else is going to do it. Who is that? God, the all-powerful one. Even though man may seem powerful, even though they may use deceit, even though they may, these governments may use deceit, they may use trickery, they may use power, they may use violence. And it's not like the guy he's talking about, we're going to talk about that specific person. But he's done it throughout history, right? You have powerful people, powerful men who have governments in which they use it to destroy others. We see that time and time again. But let's look at Daniel's reaction, verse 27. It says, and I, Daniel, was overcome and laid sick for some days. And I rose and I went about the king's business, but I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it. What made Daniel get ill? What appalled Daniel? What was there something in that vision that was beyond his understanding? Verse 24, his power shall be great, but not by his own power, and he shall cause a fearful destruction and shall succeed in what he does and destroy mighty men and the people who are saints. What's the problem? We got an all-knowing, all-powerful God, but he's going to go up against the saints. He's not the God, but the ruthless ruler. Is going to go up against the saints. He's going to go up against and destroy the saints. You see that? Destroy the saints. And so Daniel looks at that and he struggles with it, right? He's struggling. He's asking the why question, just like you and me. If God is all-knowing, he shows he's there right there. He's all-knowing. He's all-powerful. He's going to take them out. But why is he allowing the people to suffer? Why is he allowing the people to struggle? And this is our great struggle, isn't it? As Christians, this is the hard question. Why does bad things happen to good people? We struggle with that. This week, a friend of mine asked people, his friends on Facebook, about God. Whether they believe or don't believe, and why they believe and why they don't believe. And one guy wrote, it says, well, because there's so much suffering in the world. That's why he doesn't believe. Daniel's overcome, verse 27. He's just brokenhearted. What's going on? I'm sick, I'm depressed, I'm broke up, I'm a mess, Daniel is, right? Now, here's one possible answer. For the existence of Satan, evil, sin, and death is this: God loves us so much that he designed us with the ability to make choices, to choose either good or evil. In Daniel 8, the power and empire of the Medes and the Persian, they had the right, they could choose, right? They could choose to do good or choose to do bad, right? They could choose, and same with Greek, the Alexander the Great. He could choose to do good or choose to be bad. When he says in verse 4, I saw the ram charging westward, northward, southward, no beast could stand before him. And there was no one who could rescue from its power. He did as he pleased. He did as he chose, it says. And the empire of the Medes and Persian are not they're not seen as robot one, and the Greek empire is seen as robot two that God is making inhabit. No, in love, God's love, he designed us with the ability to make choices, to choose either good or evil. And we see that the Medo-Persians chose good. Darius allowed Ezra to go back and build the temple, right? And then he also allowed Nehemiah to go back and rebuild the wall. So there were some good things, and we like that part of the story. We like it when God's people win. We like that, don't we? I mean, oh, yay, God's people win, and it's good, and it's wonderful. But what happens when God's people loses? When I'm healed and when I'm promoted or when life is good, praise God for the kingdom of the Medes and Persians, right? But when the kingdoms that follow the Medes, things will get really tough. It get really difficult for them. See, the Greeks treated God's people, the Jewish nation, very poorly. Verse 24, his power shall be great, but not by his own power. And he shall cause fearful destruction and shall cease in what he does, destroying mighty men and the people who are saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper. Boy, I have such a hard thing with that. Making deceit prosper under his hand. And in his own mind he shall become great. He's a narcissist, right? Without warning he shall destroy many, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes. Now, you talked about the one horn becoming four horns. You might remember that little part there. Well, one of the four horns is Antiochus Epiphanes. He becomes the ruler of Syria for just 8 years, between 175 and 163, just a short amount of time. And so in order to bring his power back, he's going to force the Greek culture onto the people. Now the Greek culture, you know what the Greek culture is? There are some things about the Greek culture. Greek culture allowed free love. Greek culture had new entertainment. Greek culture had the free exchange of ideas with no one worldview being right. Pluralism. They abandoned the idea that Scripture, the Bible, had anything to say to us. What does that sound like? That's Western Enlightenment right there. That's America. That's Europe. I mean, it is. I mean, when you look at it, it's right there. That's what Antiochus Epiphanes. And these freedoms are attractive, right? There's an attraction to it. There's something about it that draws people in. And it drew some of the Jewish people in. Some of them sold out and said, you know what, it's okay. The Scriptures really don't mean what they mean. The miracles of the Bible aren't really that important. Those things don't really matter. And for Christians who compromise our faith in Jesus, we see that Jesus is only here to soothe our conscience. That Jesus is there to not have us live out the demands of the cross. That we want a little pocket God. A God that we can pull out in a private religion, a private faith. We have a self-help Bible, an escapist church. Our goal is to be happy, comfortable, convenient, and successful. And God is there to help me succeed at it. That's what happens when we buy in to a culture like the Greek culture, like our culture. With many powerful kings, Antiochus Epiphanes was not satisfied with them worshiping him, some people worshiping him. He wanted all people to worship him. And so, you know what he did? He came up from Egypt and began a destruction of the temple area. And what he did was he took out the golden altar, and he takes out the golden lampstand, and he removes it from the temple, and he puts in a statue of Zeus in the temple. And what does God do? Nothing. At least for a while. He does nothing. The people are ravaged. People are suffering. People are killed. And the all-knowing, all-powerful God doesn't do anything. And you know the people are asking what? Why? Why? Why do bad things happen to your good people? No, it's interesting that Daniel 8 really doesn't give an answer, not at least not an answer that's satisfied. It doesn't help us. At least we don't think it does, but it gives us some things. Some things that show us that God is still in control even when bad things happen to good people. First of all, there's a time limit on the suffering. Look what he says, verse 13, when I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, for how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offerings and the transgressions that makes desolate, and the giving over the sanctuary and host be trampled underfoot? How long, right? I mean, we want to know that answer, right? And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and morning, and then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful place. In other words, the time is limited. It won't happen forever. The solution king will end up falling, things will start falling apart. He desecrates the temple in 164 BC. 3 years after Antiochus, actually in 167 BC, in 164 BC, Jacob of Judas of the Maccabees, he starts a revolt. He basically starts a civil war. And he takes over Jerusalem except for the one little spot that Antiochus still has. And it's left there. And they perform a ceremony that rededicates the temple, and they try to bring as much back as they possibly can. And they celebrate what is today called Hanukkah. The temple is rededicated. So the time does end, all right? So it's a 3-year period of time, and it does end. But also, the other thing that we can get that God is in control is that he can bring good out of our suffering. We go back to verse 14, and what does it say? For 2,300 evenings and morning, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. See, that's what happened. It would be restored to its rightful place. Although things you want to hear from someone when they're good, the last thing you want to hear if you're somebody who's going through a terrible time is, guess what? God is doing this for your own good. You don't really want to hear that. I mean, you know, that just seems like cold and harsh. But the truth is that you and I are stronger because we suffer. You know, there's an idea is that whenever things are going smooth and easy, guess what happens? You end up having bad men. And whenever things are harsh and difficult, you have better men. Because we get better whenever we suffer. Or we can. Or we get bitter. Choice is yours. You know, according to the great theologian Rocky Balboa, he talks to his son and he says this: let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place. And I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, and nobody else is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you get hit and keep moving forward. How much can you take and keep moving forward? That's how winning's done. Now, if you know what you're worth, then you go out and you get what you're worth. But you got to be willing to take the hits. And not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that. And that ain't you. Well, guess what? James, the brother of Jesus. Can you imagine being James, the brother of Jesus? Can you imagine being James' little brother? Wouldn't that be terrible? Why can't you be more like Jesus? He's the perfect kid. Imagine. That would be terrible. And this is one of the reasons why I believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, is because what would it take for me to believe that my brother is the Son of the living God. I mean, it would take quite a bit. And wouldn't it take a little bit, Tanya, for you to believe that your brother is the Son of God? I mean, it would take a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit, all right? Right, it would. It would just take a bit. And this is what James tells us. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that when you're testing of your faith, what does it do? It produces steadfastness, and let your steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. You are transformed by your suffering. You are become more conformed to the likeness of the Son, Jesus Christ. And notice that it says in verse 14 of Daniel, it says, the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful place. You know what? Today, who's God's sanctuary? It ain't this building. It's y'all. It's all y'all. You are the sanctuary of God. You are the temple of the Holy Spirit. And you will be given your rightful place, but you have to go through the suffering, and it's going to last 2,300 days. It's going to take some time. Transforming you to become more like Jesus, making you more compassionate, making you more dependent upon the Father, making you less dependent upon the world, and making you more humble. God is in control. He is all-knowing and all-powerful. He limits our suffering, and God can bring good out of suffering. So what do you do in the meantime? If you're suffering right now, what do you do in the meantime? You trust. You trust that God will bring about good. You trust that He will end the suffering. You know, the answer to the why question is a question. When my dad died, 14 years old, I wasn't very happy with God. I was mad. I was angry, and I asked the why question. And I asked it a lot. When my mom was going crazy on us, I asked the why question. When the suffering increased, I asked the why question. When things got tough, I asked the why question. And I kept looking for an answer. There wasn't a good answer. And then a teacher told us a story about Job. Job asked the why question. Can you imagine losing all 10 of your children at once? Can you imagine losing all your possessions at once? Can you imagine losing your health at once? You're going to ask why. And that's what Job asked. And it seems like it takes a long, long time before God finally speaks, right? It's at the end of the book, right? Chapter 38. And God comes up and He says this, where were you when? Where were you when? And it seems harsh, and it seems cold, and it seems difficult. But that answer, where were you when I created the universe? Where was you when I did all this? It's basically God saying, I'm sovereign, I'm in control, I know all, I'm powerful, I'm all powerful. That's God's answer. And emotionally, we don't like that answer. But why answer would be good enough for Job? Is there a good enough answer for all 10 of your kids dying? For all your possessions gone? For all your health gone? Other than, I'm God and you're not, because just like a 2-year-old, we would ask why. And we would ask why, and we would ask why, and we'd ask why, and we'd ask why. And eventually, what does God, you tell your kid? Because I'm the dad, right? I'm the mom. I said so, right? And then you go, all right. May not like the answer. It's not satisfying, is it? You know, Jesus asked why. He was on the cross. He's dying for us. And what does he say? My God, why? Why have you forsaken me? Why are you despising me? Why are you allowing this to happen to me? Why? With all the sin of the world being placed upon me, why have you forsaken me? God understands. Jesus understands. The suffering and the why question. He understands. I want you to hold on to that today. Not emotionally satisfying, is it? Doesn't make it any less true. That God loves you through Jesus Christ. And God is in control.